Hello everyone, let's get to the topic. Well, Courtney has already been announced by McLaren as the new addition to the team, and he is currently the head of strategy at Red Bull, and he will remain with the team, surprisingly, until mid-2026. Despite already being certain, he will be announced as the sporting director of McLaren. And why is this happening? Because Red Bull is doing everything it can to avoid strengthening its rivals. We know that when there are high-caliber hires, teams always try to reach an agreement on gardening leave, quarantine, as happened with Adranal, for example. They seek to agree on values, etc. Red Bull is playing the game of holding onto their people as much as possible to avoid strengthening their rivals, especially since Red Bull is in a crisis. We have also mentioned here recently a crisis where they lose a lot of important people but do not replace these positions. They are reallocating. And another example of this is that apparently, Hannah Schmitz is being trained or prepared to take Courtney's place. So once again, there will not be a hire to fill this gap, but people from within will be reallocated. This does not mean, of course, that people from within are not capable. Hannah Schmitz herself is the queen of strategy. She has become known as the queen of strategy in recent years. But when you have this happening on several important fronts within a team, it is because there is a crisis there. So McLaren is holding on as much as possible, just like they did with Jonathan Whitley. Remember we mentioned Whitley earlier in the context of Sauber? They also held on to Whitley as much as possible to avoid strengthening. The behind the scenes of Formula One are always quite lively, and we now have the continuation of the George Russell versus FIA feud. We must remember that Russell confronted the FIA, questioning why they want to keep issuing fines for everything. We must remember that Russell confronted the FIA, questioning why they want to keep issuing fines for everything. Since we don't know where this money is going, what they are doing with the money, how the management transparency is, etc. Since we don't know where this money is going, what they are doing with the money, how the management transparency is, etc. Well, this time, the FIA publicly responded to George Russell. It took a while, right? But they responded. And the one who responded was not even Mohammed Ben Sulayem, who is the main target of criticism not only from drivers but also from teams, Formula One, etc. It was Nicolas Tambazis, who is the head of single-seater racing at the FIA. He emphasized that all the money collected is invested in issues, that these fines of €50,000, €10,000, and so on are reversed for this purpose. It was also highlighted that last year, the FIA invested over €10 million in social projects and grassroots motorsport projects, significantly exceeding the amount collected from fines, which amounted to approximately €270,000. So yes, €10 million is much more than the €270,000 collected. However, I would like to make a small criticism of the FIA, because it is great that they are reversing this money into grassroots or social projects. Excellent, nothing to complain about in that regard. The problem here is, there are things that need to be penalized sportingly and not with a fine. For example, releasing a driver at the wrong moment from the pits. There are times when the FIA issues a fine instead of a time penalty, for example. And the drivers are right to question whether this money is really being directed towards important causes. And another detail, €10 million in social projects or grassroots categories, for an individual, seems like a lot of money. But for a legal entity, for a company, for an organization, a federation like the FIA, it is nothing. €10 million is very little for social projects and projects involving talents. As I have repeatedly mentioned here on the channel, the talk about safety only applies to Formula 1 and Formula 2. Below F3, my friend, it's every man for himself. Sometimes in F3, something happens because it is in the spotlight. But beyond that, down there, it's every man for himself. Every year people die on tracks we already know are dangerous, several categories have serious accidents, and the FIA is turning a blind eye. So, $10 million for safety is little for an entity that always talks about investing a lot in safety and blah, blah, blah. That's why I keep warning you not to fall for the political discourse, because there is a lot of politics in this discourse. We are not just talking about sport, there is a lot of politics, politicking with companies, politicking with the UN, politicking with many things, and I have already made this criticism related mainly to Jean Todt when he was president of the FIA. But anyway, that is the criticism I make. And that is the FIA's response to the issue of fines. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel.